Hey everyone, it's Mostly Casual Commander. I'm BK. You can follow us on Instagram and join our conversation on Discord. Links in the description. First up is Matt playing Shelob. It's Spider Tribal, but looking to make copies of his opponent's stuff, but they're food. I'm playing Aragorn, the Uniter. With him in play, I'm going to cast all sorts of multicolored spells and outvalue my opponents. J-Man is playing Shorikai, Genesis Engine. He's got all sorts of big scary vehicles in this deck, so he's going to crew them up and smash into his opponents. And Sheoldred, the Apocalypse, is being piloted by Busterkins. It's his favorite deck. He's going to drain out his opponents by making them draw cards. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and stick around for an appearance from my fat cat Meatball. He's so chunky. Matt started things off by playing a swamp into a universal automaton. Hey, it's a spider. He passed the turn to me. I play a Flooded Strand as my land, and then I crack that, taking 1 point of life to find a breeding pool, having it enter the battlefield untapped, taking 2 more life, and follow that up with a Soul Ring in that beautiful Lord of the Rings art. Then I pass over to J-Man, who plays Ancient Den as his land and says go to Busterkins, who drops a Swamp Drop into a Blood Chief Ascension. So he'll want to load that up with counters fast so he can start draining his opponents. He passes to Matt, who plays Woodland Cemetery as his land and follows that up with a Talisman of Resilience, getting that ramp on. He moves into the red zone with his Spider Automaton and chips away at Busterkins' life total, dropping him to 39. He passes to me. I play Arid Mesa as my land, cracking that, taking 1 life and finding a Jetmir's Garden, entering the battlefield tapped, and follow that up by casting a Cultivate. And thanks to my Cultivate, I'll go find a forest entering the battlefield tapped, as well as a mountain, which I'll have come to my hand. Then I pass a turn to J-Man, who draws and plays Sky Cloud Expanse as his land. Then he uses that to cast Mobilizer Mech. So when that thing gets crewed, he can crew another thing. He passes the turn to Busterkins, who plays another swamp, and has to say go over to Matt. He plays Llanowar Wastes as his land for turn, and casts Ambition's Cost, drawing 3 cards and losing 3 life. After that, he once again chips away at Busterkins' life total with his Spider Automaton, not really caring for his Blood Chief Ascension. And he does gain a counter on it because Matt lost 3 life that turn. On my turn, I play Clifftop Retreat. Then I cast my commander, Aragorn the Uniter. With that, I'll pass the turn over to J-Man, who draws and plays Exotic Orchard as his land for turn. Afterwards, he plays Tempered Steel, getting his artifact creatures +2/+2. And he'll pass the turn over to Busterkins, who drops another swamp, and plays Sign in Blood. So he'll draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. This does not trigger his Blood Chief Ascension though, because it only looks at his opponents. He passes the turn over to Matt, who plays a forest, and then plays Arcane Signet as a follow-up. Using that, he'll cast Sky Fisher Spider, sacking his Universal Automaton to blow up the Blood Chief Ascension before that thing gets out of hand. Busterkins tries to convince Matt to kill my Aragorn, but he ultimately decides on blowing up Blood Chief Ascension. On my turn, I play a Plains, and then cast the Great Henge. This will trigger my Aragorn, giving him +4/+4 until the end of the turn. Then, using the Great Henge, I gain 2 life, and then cast Temur Sabertooth. Again, that will trigger my Aragorn, getting him +4/+4, as well as gaining a counter and drawing me a card. I move into combat at J-Man, and then he just takes all the commander damage to his face, dropping to 27. I pass to him, he plays an island, and then casts Thopter Spy Network, looking to clutter up the board with a bunch of Thopters, or draw cards. On Busterkins' turn, he plays Bajukabog, and with no real good target, he just exiles Matt's graveyard. Then he casts Toxic Deluge for 5, and he'll lose his 5 life and wipe the board of all my good stuff. So my sadness hits the stack, and then Busterkins passes the turn over to Matt. He draws and plays another forest as his land before casting his commander, Shelob, Child of Ungulliant. Then he passes the turn back over to me. I play a command tower as my land, and follow that up by recasting my commander, Aragorn the Uniter. This will trigger the Great Henge, getting him a +1 counter and drawing me a card. I found a Gandalf White Rider on top, so I cast that, triggering Aragorn, getting me a 1/1, getting a +1 counter, and I get to draw a card. I used the Great Henge, so I'll gain 2 life, but I forgot to update my life total. I do so in just a moment. On J-Man's turn, he makes a Thopter on his upkeep, and then drops Mech Hanger as his land for turn, so now he can animate one of his vehicles, which he does so, turning his Mobilizer Mech into a real boy and attacking me in the air like a Rudy McBooty. So I take my beats and drop down to what will be 35. J-Man gets a draw after dealing damage and passes over to Busterkins, who plays his commander, Sheoldred the Apocalypse. With that out, we'll start losing life when we draw, just like Matt did after he drew and took 2. He played Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth, and cast Cosmic Hunger, having Shelob fight my commander Aragorn. So that'll kill Aragorn dead and make a Foodagorn for him, a food token that's a copy of Aragorn. Then he casts Stinger Fling Spider, triggering Foodagorn, pumping his commander. Stinger Fling says, yo, kill a thing with flying, so J-Man's Thopter dies before Matt moves into combat with his commander at me. I chump with my token, so basically he gets another food token. He passes, I draw, and take 2 from Sheoldred before playing Sun Petal Grove as my land for turn, and using the Great Henge, I cast my commander once again, Aragorn the Uniter. This triggers Gandalf White Rider, so I'll scry 1 before drawing off the Great Henge, triggering Sheoldred, taking 2, and then I cast Noble Hierarch, again triggering Gandalf White Rider, as well as my commander giving Gandalf +4/+4, drawing off of the Great Henge before losing 2 from Sheoldred. I move into combat with Gandalf White Rider, who's super pumped because of all these effects. I smash into Busterkins and drop him down to 20, which he updates his life total in just a second. I pass the turn to J-Man, who makes another Thopter on his upkeep. He'll draw, losing 2 from Sheoldred, and he plays a Plains as his land for turn. He crews his mech with his Thopter, and then attacks me once again in the air. I'll take 5 points of damage, and he'll get the draw card thanks to his Thopter Spy Network. This will once again trigger Sheoldred, making him lose 2. He passes the turn over to Busterkins, who draws, and then he'll gain 2. He casts Teferi's Puzzle Box, making our lives miserable, so I decide to counter that with Dovin's Veto, triggering Aragorn and Gandalf. And before passing the turn, Busterkins plays an Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. Now, he left a placeholder card in his deck, so I'm representing that with an overlay. Otherwise, you'd just see this random card with scribbles all over it. On Matt's turn, he plays Twin Silk Spider. This thing makes a whole nother spider. That will trigger his Foodagorn and pump up his commander by +4/+4 until end of turn. Then he casts Stew the Conies. So again, this will trigger his Foodagorn, pumping his commander. He'll then have Stinger Fling Spider deal damage to Aragorn, and because it has Death Touch, Aragorn dies. And this means that Shelob says, yo, make another Foodagorn, which is getting kind of absurd. Then Stew the Conies also said make a food, so he does. He moves into combat at me with his commander, and again, I chump block with one of my tokens, getting him another food token. I draw on my turn, losing 2, and play a mountain. Then I cast Aurelia, the War Leader, and feel good. I use the Great Henge to cast her, so I'll gain 2. I scry off of Gandalf. I give the team +1/+0, except for Aurelia, but she enters with a +1 counter. I lose 2 life when I drew, and then I cast Pippin, Guard of the Citadel, again triggering Gandalf, scrying 1, and pumping the team +1/+0. Then I get to draw off of the Great Henge, and Pippin enters with a +1 counter. I lose 2 because of Sheoldred. I cast Growth Spiral, yet again triggering Gandalf, scrying 1, pumping the team +1/+0, drawing a card, losing 2 from Sheoldred, and playing a Fabled Passage because Growth Spiral said I could. Then I crack Fabled Passage, and I go and find a Plains and have that enter the battlefield untapped. Then I cast Swords to Plowshares, again scrying off of Gandalf, pumping the team +1/+0, and getting rid of that pesky, warty Shelob, paying 2 thanks to my Soul Ring. So Shelob dies, Matt gains a bunch of life, and I move into combat at Matt. This triggers my Aurelia, untapping my creatures on the attack, and Matt decides to take all of it to his face, dropping to 21. Aurelia said, yo, attack again, so I do so, and attack with the same creatures. This time it forces Matt to chump, otherwise he'd be dead. So he chump blocks all of my creatures, which does not kill them, but kills his. On my end step, J-Man flashes in Fairy Mastermind. He didn't want to do it when I was drawing, because he didn't want to lose life. On his upkeep, he makes a Thopter, draws for turn, loses 2, then he plays an island as his land for turn before casting a timely Soul Ring. Where was that turn 1? Am I right? Then he casts his commander, Shorikai Genesis Engine, and has quite the cluttered board state. He moves into the red zone, picking on Busterkins with a 3/3 because of his Tempered Steel, dropping Busterkins to 19. And he drew because of his Thopter Spy Network, losing 2 because of Sheoldred. On Busterkins' turn, he draws, gaining 2, and plays a Swamp before casting Wound Reflection. This thing can do work against his opponents. Each end step, they can lose life equal to the life that they lost that turn. What? On Matt's turn, he drew and plays a Swamp as his land for turn before recasting his commander, Shelob, Child of Ungoliant. Pretty sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. He moves to end step, losing an additional 2 from Wound Reflection because he lost 2 when he drew. On my turn, I draw and then play Scalding Tarn as my land for turn, but right now that's a forest and a swamp. What? I cast Samwise Gamgee. On On the cast, I trigger Gandalf, pumping the team and scrying 1. In response, J-Man casts Dispatch, targeting my Aurelia, because it's Aurelia. So he's trying to exile her. And I'm like, nah, with a negate. And again, this triggers Gandalf, pumping the team +1/+0, and I get to scry. In response to that, J-Man casts Reality Shift. He really doesn't want my Aurelia around. So I respond to that by tapping my Pippin and giving Aurelia protection from instants, keeping her around. I resolve my scry, and then I have Samwise Gamgee enter the battlefield, so the Great Henge will put a +1 counter on it, as well as get me a card draw. This triggers Sheoldred, I lose 2 life. J-Man's Fairy triggers because I drew my second card that turn, so he gets to draw, again triggering Sheoldred, losing 2 life. I then cast Frodo, Determined Hero, triggering Gandalf, and getting +1/+0, that's the important part. I scry 1, keep it on top, that enters the battlefield with a +1 counter on it, I draw once again, Sheoldred triggers, I drop to 14, and Samwise sees Frodo entering the battlefield, I gain a food token before combat. Aurelia triggers, untapping all of my creatures, and before damage, I cast Return of the Wild Speaker, pumping all of my non-human creatures +3/+3. So everything's real big. This again triggers Gandalf, so I scry 1 and pump the team +1/+0. My opponents take their beats, but Busterkins blocked my Gandalf with his Sheoldred, and I forgot she had Death Touch, so Gandalf becomes the 5th card on top of my library. After that combat, Aurelia is like, yo, there's another combat, so I swing Pippin and Aurelia at J-Man and my Noble Hierarch at Busterkins. Before blocks, I tap Pippin and give Aurelia protection from creatures. J-Man crews his Mobilizer mech, which allows his Shorikai to be crewed, and then he declares blocks against my Pippin. My opponents take their beats, Shorikai and Pippin both die, and because of wound reflections, after I end my turn, my opponents and I lose the amount of life that we lost this turn, knocking Matt and J-Man out of the game. I pass the turn to Busterkins, who casts Baleful Mastery on my Aurelia, exiling her forever, which makes me pretty sad, but she did some work, so I'm not too mad about it. He has to pass, and on his end step, I crack my food token, gaining 3, I draw, and then I recast my commander, Aragorn the Uniter. This will trigger Samwise, getting me a food token, as well as Aragorn entering with a +1 counter and drawing me a card. Then I cast Frodo Baggins in that beautiful alternate extended artwork. This triggers my commander with the green, so +4/+4 goes to Samwise Gamgee, and I get a 1/1. Frodo Baggins had me become tempted by the ring, so I chose Sam before moving into combat. Swinging exactly 11.
Response?
Yeah.
I'm gonna tap that and take it.
With that, I knock Busterkins out of the game, making me the winner. Yay! And here's Meatball. He's so chunky. And there you have it, that's the game. Seems like I was able to use that wound reflection to my advantage, but all's fair in love and war. Let us know what you thought about the game in the comments. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, thank you for watching.